Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting being held on Wednesday, the 16th of June 2021. This meeting is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19. This meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images or audio of those individuals present and or speaking at Planning Committee will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. Due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19, Planning Committee site meetings have been suspended, and this meeting will not be open to the press and general public. However, interested parties may make a request to attend remotely and speak in regard to any item on this agenda. Votes for this meeting will be taken by roll call. When a vote is required, members will be asked to state their vote when their name is called. I'll now carry out a roll call for attendance. Please, can you announce yourself as present when I call out your name? We'll start with Councillor Adams.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Aldworth.
Present.
Councillor Andrews.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dix.
Present.
Councillor Fussell.
I think that's apologies, Chair.
That's apologies. Councillor Goff. Apology. Councillor Harding.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Higgs.
Apologies, Chair.
Apology. Thank you. Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Simmons.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Ridgewell has sent in an apology, and myself. So yes, we are quorate. Thank you for all confirming your attendance. Please can I remind attendees that if they lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as the meeting is quorate. Committee services are on hand and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. Item number 1 on the agenda is the apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Bevan, Councillor Fussell, Councillor Goff, Councillor Higgs and Councillor Ridgewell. Item number 2 is declarations of interest, and councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and members. I'm going to ask you to raise your hands to signal if you have a declaration, or any members have a declaration. I do apologise, I can't see hands, so I am dependent on my Vice Chair, Councillor Aldworth, to inform me if any hands go up. No?
No.
Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item 3. That's the Planning Committee meeting minutes of the 19th of May, which is pages 1 to 10. I'll go through them for accuracy first. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and I think that's it. I've got pages 9 to 10 here, but there is only 8 pages I can see on the minutes. Can I have somebody to move the minutes, please?
I'll move the minutes, Chair.
Okay, seconded. Anyone?
Second, Chair.
Second, Chair.
Oh, good. My hands thing has now appeared at the side of my screen, so I can manage to see who's asking questions. Now we'll move on to Agenda item 5, which is the emerging LDP and the candidate sites process. And it's a presentation tonight by Victoria Morgan. Victoria, the stage is yours.
Good evening, members. I'll just share my screen in the presentation. Is that visible to you all?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So yes, my name is Victoria Morgan. I'm a principal planner in the strategic planning team responsible for preparing the local development plan. And I'm just going to do a 10-minute or so presentation for you this evening on the candidate site process. So what are candidate sites? Candidate sites are sites submitted to the council by a site promoter, which could be a landowner or a developer, for inclusion as an allocation in the local development plan. Now, we make it very clear that the submission of a site does not mean that it will be allocated in the plan for its preferred use. It will need to be subject to a vigorous site assessment process first. Sites need to be submitted during the call for candidate sites period. We've opened the call for candidate sites now, but technically the formal call for candidate sites is the period after the delivery agreement is approved by Welsh Government, which we are anticipating later this month and the end of August. The guidance suggests that the window for submitting sites should be a minimum of 6 weeks and must be done in advance of the preferred strategy. We've sought to undertake our call for candidate sites as early as possible in the process, as we know from past experience how long the assessment process can take. We also feel that knowing what sites are available in each area will help inform the preferred strategy. So what type of sites can be submitted? Sites can be submitted for any use, so housing, employment, retail, community facilities, gypsy and traveller sites, transport infrastructure, biodiversity, green infrastructure, minerals, any type of land use that the plan covers. However, we will only look to allocate sites that are large enough to be classed as major developments. So for housing, this is sites of 0.5 hectares in gross site area, or that can accommodate 10 or more dwellings. For other uses, this would be 1 hectare, or where a building of 1,000 square metres floor space can be accommodated. Landowners are able to submit small sites, but these will be assessed in a different way. Those small sites that are outside of the settlement boundary will be considered as part of the settlement boundary review. How can sites be submitted? When submitting a site, the site promoter must complete a detailed form, which includes a number of questions about the site. The form includes questions about the suitability of the site for the proposed development, such as whether there are any sources of pollution, or whether it's a flood risk area, whether there are any ecological issues and utilities. There's also questions around access and proximity to public transport. The responses to these questions will be used by the strategic planning section and other departments to assess the suitability of the site. Unlike the process for the previous development plan, the latest guidance on the candidate site process requires the process to be front-loaded. So site promoters are encouraged to submit information to support their site as early in the process as possible. The information should be proportionate to the scale of the site and nature of constraints. We know that it could cost thousands of pounds to prepare a detailed site survey, well, the detailed site surveys that we would expect to support a planning application. And we know that landowners, particularly in certain parts of the county borough, may be reluctant to do this without knowing what the preferred strategy for the LDP is going to be and which areas would be looking for growth. We've therefore indicated that supporting evidence should be proportionate and appropriate. So, for example, if a landowner knows that their site has ecological value, then we would expect to see an ecological survey. or if the site is within a high-risk coal mining area, it would be within the landowner's interest to submit a coal mining risk assessment, for example. So a candidate site's methodology paper has been published to determine how the sites will be assessed. After the close of the call for candidate sites at the end of August, we will publish a candidate sites register. At this stage, this will only include a map of the site and basic details of all the sites submitted, such as the reference number and the site name. The first stage of the assessment will be an initial filtering exercise. We will assess all sites that are submitted against the site size threshold and also against some high-level filtering questions to filter out any sites that wouldn't meet national planning policy requirements. This would remove any sites proposed for built development that are in isolated locations in the open countryside or are entirely within a high-risk flood zone, or that are subject to international or national biodiversity designations, such as SACs or SSSIs. Those sites that pass the stage 1 filtering will then be assessed in more detail by other council departments. A traffic light system for assessment will assist with the scoring, and this has been agreed with internal stakeholders. This will allow interested parties to clearly see how the site is scored. Sites with a number of green scores that will indicate that the site has few constraints. Sites with amber scores are where there is a constraint, but this constraint could be mitigated. Sites with any red score means that there's a significant constraint. We'll need to look at the scores pragmatically. A site that scores red on a single question may be enough for it to be ruled out from further consideration if that constraint is significant enough to preclude development. For example, if it can't be demonstrated that it can be accessed, even if the site scores green on all the other categories. Likewise, a site may score amber on a number of categories, but they all may be strict constraints that could be overcome, so it wouldn't necessarily rule it out. We've also introduced a grey category too, where we have insufficient information to assess the site. In these situations, we could request further detailed information from the developer if we think the site may be suitable for further consideration. We will also consult with external consultees, such as utility providers, NRW, and the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust on sites that are suitable for further consideration. Following the completion of the stage 2 assessments, we will have a list of sites that are suitable for further consideration and sites that have been ruled out. There may also be sites that require further information before a decision can be made. At this stage, none of the sites will be assessed against the preferred strategy. We intend to present the sites that are suitable for further consideration to Planning Committee for your input, as well as explaining the reasons why other sites have been discounted. We hope to be in a position to do this from November onwards, although this will be dependent on the number of candidate sites that are submitted. In the adopted LDP, we considered over 600 parcels of land. In the withdrawn replacement LDP, we had over 200 sites submitted. And at this stage, it's too early to say how many sites we're likely to be considering this time round. Depending on the number of sites submitted, we may need to hold these sessions across a series of meetings with Planning Committee at the end of the year. Following the discussion of the sites with Planning Committee, the sites will be assessed against the preferred strategy of the plan. As part of the evidence base for the preferred strategy, an initial site assessment for all sites that were submitted will be published alongside the preferred strategy consultation in June 2022. It should be noted that the preferred strategy will not show all allocations, but may identify any key or strategic sites that are necessary to deliver the preferred strategy. We'll also ask site promoters to submit any further information that may be required, including viability assessments to demonstrate that their site is viable and deliverable, as only sites that will realistically be delivered in the plan period should be allocated. New candidate sites can be submitted as part of the preferred strategy consultation, but landowners would need to provide all the necessary details at this stage, including viability assessments. Any new sites will be assessed and further consideration will be given to all sites to determine which best meet the preferred strategy and considered deliverable and will best contribute to meeting the aims, objectives and vision of the plan. The proposed allocations for the deposit plan will be identified towards the end of 2022. We'll also be holding a series of member events to show members what allocations are likely to be included in their areas, so members will have the opportunity to give their views on sites. We intend to present the allocations to Planning Committee, who will make recommendations that will be considered by the LDP focus group. The focus group will report to Council, and the final decision on the content of the deposit LDP, including site allocations, will then rest with the Council. So, are there any questions?
I don't see any hands up at the moment at all. Any members wish to raise anything at all before we thank Victoria for her presentation? Councillor
Yeah.
Mike Adams, your hand is up. Yes, I can see your hand.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's put my camera on. We talked about how many there were at the previous LDP, which was, of course, then suspended. Many of those are probably still available in developers' minds as possible candidate sites, and some information would have been given and decision making probably made at that time. We will be looking back at all of that information for whatever comes in this time around, Victoria, and we would probably expect to see quite a few repetitions.
Yes, I think it's highly likely that some of the sites that were submitted as part of the withdrawn LDP will be submitted again. And again, we do have an evidence base that in terms of site assessments and things that were done at that time that we will draw upon, but we have to remember that we're likely to have a different preferred strategy for this plan, and obviously the sites will be assessed against those criteria. Yeah,
there are many changes since that time, obviously, in so many factors. So yeah, thanks for that, and I'm sure we'll all have the right kind of questions to ask when more information is brought forward. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I've got Councillor Aldworth and then Councillor Dix. Councillor Aldworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, at what stage do you publish the applicant's name and address, Victoria?
We won't be publishing the applicant's name and address in the candidate sites register for GPDR reasons. It would literally just be the site name and basic details about the site itself rather than the applicants themselves.
It's basically because of declarations of interest from members and officers. You know, I know these rules, but the rules work both ways. So is it up to say members of council reading the candidate sites if they recognise that somebody could have a connection, that they should speak out then, or you know, what are the expectations for a honest you know, situation?
I think possibly this might be one for legal to answer. I know Rob Tranter's got his hand up.
Yes, Robert, could you come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Clearly, you can only declare an interest if you know that you've got that interest. So whilst the landowner might not be, that information might not be available, you may be aware of who the landowner is via another avenue. And it would be worth, I think, members, if they see sites on the in the final report that are familiar to them, to make some inquiries with officers, I think, to check whether or not there are individuals that are known to them. I would imagine, Councillor Aldworth, that if a close personal associate of you was a landowner, you would know about that in discussions with that person. And in that case, you would need to consider whether or not you need to declare a personal interest. And of course, I can help in giving advice to members on that. And indeed, I would encourage members to approach me to discuss these issues if they arise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Dix.
Thank you for that answer.
Sorry, did you want to come back in, Councillor Aldworth?
No, Chair, I was satisfied with the legal
response.
Officer's response. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dix, welcome to the planning meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. As well, I was wondering, Victoria, the last LDP didn't make it all the way, failed. Can you just remind me why it failed? I can't remember. What was the reason why that happened?
There were several reasons. One was that at the time of us going out to deposit, there was strong feelings against a number of sites in the Caerphilly Basin in particular, and other greenfield sites. In addition, we were in the process of beginning the early stages of preparing a strategic development plan for the South East Wales region, and there was a feeling that the matters around the level of growth should be considered as part of the SDP. Now, things haven't progressed as quickly as originally anticipated with the SDP, and it's now reached a stage where we need to proceed with a local development plan in advance of the SDP being prepared, and what we include within the local development plan will then help to inform the SDP.
That's the strategic development plan, which covers the city deal area.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Rhian Kite, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in and add?
Yes, Chair. I was just in the background in case Victoria needed some assistance, but I think Victoria's adequately covered it. And if you want any reminders, I can always circulate the resolution of the council that sought to withdraw the plan. So I'm happy to recirculate that if members want a reminder.
Thank you, Rhian. I don't see any other hands up at this stage. Just check down the list. No, there's no further questions. So can I thank you, Victoria, for this presentation? Excellent presentation, very clear and precise and concise. I think now we don't have to vote on this. It's just a matter of noting the presentation. So thank you for that contribution. We'll now go back because I've overlooked two parts. One was to tell you that we were going to take the agenda in a different order. So you probably realise that by now. The other was to approve the minutes, which I failed to do. So could you just give me a show of hands just to approve the minutes? They were moved and seconded. So can I see your hands up on that, please?
Chair, I'll abstain on that because I was not present at that meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
that's carried.
Yeah, Chair. That's carried. Thank you. So now we can move on to agenda item 4, so out of order. Agenda item 4 is code number 21/0466 NCC. It's Rosebank Cottage, Brookside Bungalows, Cwmgelly, Blackwood. It's pages 9 to 20 in your minutes, and the case officer is Liz Rowley. Liz, would you like to start this presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Hopefully you can see the presentation on screen now. Is that correct, Chair?
It is, yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is an application to extend the period of time to commence development by a further 5 years for the erection of a dwelling within the curtilage of Rosebank Cottage, Cwmgelly, Blackwood. The application is being reported to committee in the same vein as the extant permission, in that the site falls outside of settlement limits and is therefore considered to be a departure from the adopted LDP. So this is the site here in grey. To the north, we have the Chartist Bridge. And then to the south is the mini roundabout leading on to Blackwood High Street and the northern retail park of Blackwood. So this is a more closer look at the site. Obviously the site area is at present is garden and of Rosebank Cottage. Rosebank Cottage is to the north here, and then the red line boundary is a proportion of the garden of Rosebank Cottage. So there's Rosebank Cottage to the north, Woodview to the south here, and then the vehicle access is off the B4251, which is an existing access serving Rosebank, the cottages down to Brookside Bungalow, and Woodview Cottages to the south. So here are the proposed floor and roof plans. In terms of the dwelling's footprint, it's almost cross-like shape here. And these are the elevations. So the elevations and the design of the dwelling obviously is quite contemporary, and the site falls sloping, so it falls from the front to the rear. So obviously the site is, the dwelling has been designed in such a way to take account of the topography. And these are the standard monochrome elevations, just basic line drawings, but they appreciate they are a bit cluttery. So that's why obviously the coloured elevations provide you with a more informed idea of how the dwelling would look. So the next two slides relate to the vehicle access into the site. So this is directly off the B4251, and then the vehicle access and the parking area would be located within this green bank area. This is obviously the garden of Rosebank. Again, this is a photo from the patio of Rosebank at present. Looking south, so you can see Woodview, and then on this little small retaining garden wall here, in this area where the tree is, that's where the proposed dwelling would be sited and fall down towards the lower bottom of the garden. And these next two photographs show the bottom level, the bottom of the garden then of the proposed dwelling. There's another one here, the Charters Bridge in the background there. And then looking up at the site, this is Rosebank Cottage directly to the north. So obviously you could see this area of the garden would then become in separate ownership. So in terms of the application itself, two neighbours were consulted and a site notice was erected. No objections have been raised by members of the public or consultees. In that plan, permission has previously been granted and there are no amendments to the approved plans. The proposal is considered to accord with policy CW2 and CW3 of the local development plan. However, since the original permission has been granted, sustainable drainage legislation and the Future Wales National Plan has come into effect. So in terms of sustainable drainage, this means that the previous land drainage condition would now be replaced with the need for the developer to obtain SAB approval, and the land drainage condition would no longer be required. And in terms of the Future Wales National Plan, an additional condition has been recommended, requiring gigabit broadband infrastructure to be installed. So subject to conditions recommended in the officer report, the development is considered acceptable in planning terms, and the officer recommendation is to approve the application. That concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Any members wish to raise any issues, ask any questions for clarity? I don't see any Councillor Dix.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, I know the site quite well, Elizabeth, and I'm just wondering, have the highways haven't got any concerns about the access in there with another property there and the vehicles? Because if you drive down into that area, it can take you 15 to 20 minutes to get out of that junction. I just wondering what was the highways report on that, because it is very difficult to get out of that junction, because you've got one roundabout, another roundabout, short distance of road, and that's where, and right in the middle of that between the two roundabouts is the junction, correct? Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor, and obviously this is a Section 73 application, so the principle of development on the site was previously considered, and at that point in time, the highway considerations were considered. The site suitability in terms of a proposed dwelling in that location was considered acceptable, subject to conditions relating to parking, a gradient no more than 1 in 8, and materials. Since then, also in between, let me get this straight, Woodview to the south, there's also been planning consent granted there for 3 dwellings, and highways have requested upgrade improvement works to that lane itself, not in particular to the access. I appreciate the access is a bit awkward and difficult that to get out, especially if you was turning right. But the highways officer have considered the acceptability of the principle of development in that location previously. So as part of a Section 73 application, the local planning authority can only consider whether or not there's been a material change in circumstances. In that respect, since 2016, there hasn't been a material change in circumstances relating to highway safety, and therefore we cannot revisit the original merits of the proposal.
Okay, thank you for that.
I don't see any further indication from any other member, so is someone happy to move the recommendations with permission be granted?
Yeah, I'll move them, Chair.
You move. Okay, thank you.
Second,
is that second? Thank you,
yeah.
Councillor Aldworth. So it's been moved and seconded. Oh, Councillor Adams, I see your hand has just popped up. Would you like to come in now? Or is it an old hand?
No, actually, it was to be prepared to move the officer's recommendation, but Councillor Dix came, and he is a local member as well, so that's always a good indication. I was going to say yes, I'm also familiar with that area, and I actually went almost past it today on my visit across the bridge out and back to Blackwood. And then Liz came in even quicker to second it.
So you're quite happy. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. We'll put it to the vote. The recommendations is for permission to be granted. I'll go down the list, starting with you, Councillor Adams. You're on mute, but I'll take it that because you seconded it, that you're for the recommendation. You're still on mute. I can see you talking. Councillor Adams, you're still on mute. That's okay.
There we go. It's back now. I don't know where it disappeared. Yeah, okay. Willing to support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aldworth.
Yes, approve.
Okay, Councillor Andrews.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan is apologised. Councillor Mike Davis.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dix.
For.
Councillor Fussell apology. Councillor Goff apology. Councillor Harding.
For.
Councillor Higgs apologised. Councillor Hussey.
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
For.
Councillor Simmons.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
For.
Thank you. And myself for. That's unanimous. So that's been approved, and that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.